This just happened 20 minutes ago. I can't get a hold of my friends or family by phone, and it's another hour until my roommate gets home, but I feel the need to share this, despite it not being as horrible as other encounters here. I was just about to turn off the lights to go to sleep when I heard these loud screams out my window. It's cracked open so I can hear pretty clearly a man shouting and ranting. He's about average height, kind of big, and in his 30s maybe, and I've never seen him on the street before. He's not really making any sense, rambling loudly about how he hates this and hates that at the top of his lungs. Either drugs, mental illness, or both. He's stumbling, swinging his sweater around his head and making noises, and seems very unstable. In my idiocy, I'm looking outside with the bedroom light still on. It's pitch black out there. I don't think of this until this man looks up at my window and points directly at me. He says, "Hey you, come here. I see you. Come talk to me." I'm freaking out at this point, thinking I'm not understanding him right. Surely he can't be talking to me. I realize what has happened and turn off the light and look out again. He's crossing our lawn and going up to our door. I can't remember if I locked it when I took out the dog. I'm in a duplex, but the inner door might as well be made of paper. He's pounding on the door, ringing the doorbell repeatedly, still yelling, still asking to talk to me. I had no idea what this guy is capable of, so I locked the shitty chain lock on my inside door, grabbed the dog and a large knife, and went into my bedroom and locked that door too. He's not leaving, so I decide to be safe rather than sorry, and I dial 911. This all takes place within like 30 seconds. I tell the woman on the phone what's happening, and she tells me somebody else has called about him too, and there are officers on the way. Thank you, mystery neighbor, I thought to myself. I'm on the line for about a minute trying to give details when I suddenly hear two voices. The older man downstairs has opened the door and is trying to talk him down. He's a bit calmer now, but still very agitated. The police arrive. He's freaking out the single cop who gets there first, but eventually he gets him into handcuffs and I give a statement. Police says he's known to them, has mental issues, and is also on something tonight, so that's that. Even though nothing really happened, it still really freaked me out. I don't like that this unstable man might remember where I live since he seemed to target me specifically. It happened in my bedroom at the age of 10. I always had trouble sleeping and spent most nights tossing and turning. I was a horror film fanatic as a child, and being scared was something I didn't have much experience with. I was not afraid of the dark, nor was I easily swayed by strange sounds or odd encounters. I did, however, know when to haul ass out of a situation or to find a trusted adult. I always slept with my closet doors open, which will come to be of some significance later in the story. I should also mention that my family home was in a heavily wooded area, in what some may refer to as the middle of nowhere. One night, around 1 a.m., I awoke to a sound coming from underneath my bed. It sounded like one of my cats was scratching themselves with one of their feet or doing something to cause a thumping beneath me. I had heard this same sounds many times before, and its source had always been one of my fuzzy friends. So this time, I didn't look. Closed my eyes and tried to resume my slumber. I turned over onto my left side, which left me facing the wall against which my bed was pressed up. I heard the sound again, and thinking that my kitty was directly beneath me, I said, "Good night." I was able to fall asleep once again. The next time I awoke, it was to a surreal and shocking scene. The sheet and comforter of my bed were no longer covering me. I saw a man standing over my bed, poking me. Literally poking me with his finger. And the way in which he did so was truly horrifying. It was not the way that a child would poke a friend in jest. It was as if he was touching another human being for the first time, exploring the sensation of the tip of his index finger, jabbing at flesh. What I saw was so unbelievable and so impossibly strange that I believed I was dreaming. I tried desperately to awake from my nightmare, to no avail. The poking continued. He poked at my chest, my belly, my legs, and my arms. Paralyzed and scared shitless, I yelled, "Wake up!" And with this, the man threw himself to the floor and closed his eyes, as if he was trying to lead me to believe that he was asleep or dead. I have no idea. It was at this time I realized I could not have been dreaming. I somehow found the ability to move, and I jumped from the top of my bed over the man lying on the floor next to me and ran towards my parents' room. When I got to their bedroom door, something came over me. I told myself that this was all impossible, that there was no way that a person could have entered our home without breaking in, as we had always kept every door and window locked at night. I had seen many strange things in my home, while either falling asleep or waking up. By the third or fourth time after speaking to my mom or dad about it, I knew that it was my mind playing tricks on me. Plush toys do not have the ability to turn and whisper into each other's ears. Do not ask why, dear listener, as I have no explanation to offer you, but I turned away from my parents' bedroom door and decided to hastily check the house for a break-in. What I found was that nothing was out of the ordinary. No broken windows or locks. No busted doors. I assured myself that I had to have been dreaming or hallucinating it, blamed my obsession with horror for this. I made my way down the long, dark, and narrow hallway to my bedroom. I peeked inside and saw no one. I turned on the light, got down on the floor just outside the doorway, and looked under the bed. Still nothing. I proceeded to check both of my windows for signs of a break-in, which were not present. Both windows were closed and locked. I knew it. I was totally seeing things. I crawled back into bed and decided to watch some TV in order to calm myself down and distract myself from thoughts of the scary as hell dream / hallucination I just had. I turned on the TV, flipped to a channel with a seemingly boring program. This always helped me become sleepy, and put the remote control on my bedside table. I was lying on my right side, facing away from the wall that I mentioned previously. As I lay there, my eyes began to adjust to the dark room with the faint light from the TV screen. Just beyond the TV, I saw something that made my heart sink into the pit of my stomach. Inside my closet, with one of the doors now slightly closed, I saw the man standing perfectly still, facing the wall, hiding, waiting for me to fall asleep, I imagine. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I sat and stared at the man in the closet for what seemed like minutes, but was likely only a few seconds. I quietly got out of bed, hoping that the man wouldn't notice and that my dad could catch him hiding in the closet. I once again made my way to my parents' bedroom door, still remaining as quiet as I possibly could, and went inside. I shook my dad and my mom at the same time, and when they awoke, I said, "Shh, don't make any sound. There's somebody in my closet." My parents both jumped up and said, "What?" I repeated myself and asked them to please call 911. My mom immediately picked up the phone. Neither of my parents doubted my claim, as I had always been honest and forthright. They both knew that there was no way I was making this up or that I was mistaken. I'm sure that the look I must have had on my face made it clear that this was really happening. My dad told my mom and I that he was going to look and urged us to stay in their bedroom and lock the door, so we did. At this point, I was beyond scared. I didn't know what the man was capable of, whether he had a weapon or whether my dad was safe. I just stood in the room with my mom and cried. After what felt like hours, my dad knocked on the door and told me it was him and that it was okay to open the door. My mom unlocked the door and let my dad inside. I said something to the effect of, "Did you get him?" And my dad looked at me with the most unsettling and confused look imaginable. He said, "There's no one there." I assured him that there was indeed a man in my room and that he'd been poking me. My dad said that he just checked every inch of the house and found nobody. He had also checked the doors and windows, just as I had done. Then it hit me. He must have had a key. As soon as I said this, my parents looked at each other in absolute terror. Our nearest neighbor, a trusted and beloved friend whom we considered family, was in possession of a key to our house, as she had regularly babysat me since I was a toddler. She was the only person outside of my immediate family with a key to our home. Soon after this revelation, the police arrived, took statements, checked around our property, and left. None of us got any sleep that night. The next day, my dad went to my neighbor's house and asked if she knew where her key to our house was. She said yes, and when she went to show him, she saw that it was missing. Her home had no signs of a break-in, and she had always kept her doors and windows locked. My parents had all of the locks on our doors changed and opted to never give a key to anyone, except in the wake of an emergency. I never discovered the identity of the man that lurked in my bedroom that night. The event left me traumatized, and it took a very long time for me to accept what had happened and move on. My sleeping trouble turned into full-on insomnia, and for about a decade, I was unable to sleep without a light on. I've always wanted to share this, but I could never find the right place. For reference, at the time this all began, I was 14 and a freshman in high school, back in 2008/2009, so not recent at all. It all began during the first couple of weeks of school. I went to this school district all my life and never had any real issues since I had no enemies and only friends. So anyway, it all began one Friday afternoon after school. I was hanging out with friends outside of the school until my mom came to pick me up, when I decided to go upstairs to my locker and put a textbook away that I was originally going to bring home for the weekend. When I got up to my locker, there was a note taped onto it. My name was written on it with a heart around it, and I read it. It was a love letter signed, "Your secret admirer." Thinking it was a friend playing a prank, I laughed it off and tossed it in the trash. When I confronted them downstairs, they denied that they put a note on my locker and insisted that it was probably from a boy. I didn't know what to think, but I did think of a few cute guys I went to school with and hoped it was from one of them. But I sighed and thought it could have been anyone, and most likely none of them. 2 months go by. During this time, we had school picture day, and my mom had ordered some, which were eventually given to us during one of our classes. I kept them in my locker so I wouldn't lose them. It was a Friday, and I was going to stay after school with friends again and hang around until the school football game was over later in the evening. I waited until about 2 hours after school ended or so to grab my belongings out of my locker, including the photos. I put them in my backpack and headed on outside and hung out around the football field with my friends until people started showing up for the game, after which we walked around or sat in the grass and talked the rest of the evening. When I got home that night, I gave my mom the photos, and she noticed that one of the wallet-sized photos had been cut off from the rest. I never bothered to look at all of them, and so I wasn't aware of this. I told her I didn't cut one off, but she didn't believe me. I didn't know what to think of it. A few weeks go by, and I all but forgot about the missing photo. I found another note taped to my locker, and this time, one of my school photos was in it, with a heart drawn around my head. A wallet-sized photo. The note made mention of how beautiful I looked during the game, sitting with my friends in the grass, talking and laughing. This made me feel weird. Whoever's doing this had stolen one of my photos either out of my locker during school, which means they have my lock combination, on that Friday or while I left my backpack unattended during the football game. Once again, it was probably one of my friends playing a prank on me, and I didn't say anything about it. It had been several months since that last note. Things took a rather stressful turn the following week. I was at home after school one day, alone, while my mom was working a double shift when somebody came knocking on my front door. Thinking it was a pesky neighbor, I took my sweet time to answer it and opened the door to find nobody there. I looked around and saw nothing but other mobile homes and neighbors' cars. I shut the door and resumed what I was doing. I heard the knocking again about 10 minutes later. I took my time to answer it and found Mike, one of our only friendly male neighbors, there with his Boston Terrier on a leash. He asked me if I had somebody over, which I didn't. He then told me that he saw somebody snooping around my home a few minutes ago. I felt uncomfortable and said I didn't have anyone over and asked who it was, and he said he didn't recognize him. I thanked him and locked all of my doors and windows after he left. The next month was full of incidents where our motion sensor backlight would come on in the evening and was capped off by my mom calling the police after she found a dead rabbit nailed to our back porch in a rather cruel fashion. At the time, I never would have imagined that the notes, the snooping around, and now the dead rabbit were the work of somebody who had been stalking me in the shadows for the last several months, but it all came to fruition the following day at school. I found the final note taped to my locker. There was a big bulge in it, and when I took it apart, the foot of a rabbit fell onto the floor in front of me. I shrieked in terror as a teacher came running up to me, and I pointed out the rabbit's foot. He picked it up and asked me where it came from. Showed him the note, and we immediately went to the office and showed the vice principal what we found. Later in the day, I was called into the office and found my mom there with the principal and vice principal. It was there that I had to recount the events over the last couple of months for the first time to anyone and give the names of students that I think may have been responsible, based on any suspicious interactions I had through social media or in school, but I never had anyone that seemed off to me. They told me that if anything were to happen again, to let them know and they'll get the police involved if my life appears to be in danger. Mom had already contacted the state trooper who visited our home the previous night about the rabbit's foot being found in my locker at school and how a student may have been involved in it. From that day onward, nothing else major happened. However, about halfway through my junior year, I got another love letter. This time, instead of it being written out by hand, it was typed out and signed, "Your secret admirer from freshman year." I had all but forgotten about what had happened during my freshman year. I kept this note and gave it to the principal, who kept it as evidence in case things escalated again, but they never did. Luckily, nothing else ever happened afterwards. At least nothing that was obvious. This was years ago. I was around 12 or 13. I grew up in a small town, technically a village, about an hour and a half away from a big city in the US. On summer days, my best friends and I would also venture around our woodsy neighborhood and do typical kid things. I had a little sister who was around 7 or 8 at the time, and she also had a little sister the same age. My friends' names were Sarah, my little sister Sammy, and her little sister Alex. We would occasionally let them tag along on our adventures, especially if our parents made us. Our favorite thing to do was walk to our neighbor's house. We'll call them the Smiths, and use their trampoline. It was in our neighborhood, but the houses are pretty spread out with dense forest in between. We'd set off towards their place, and it was about a 20-30 minute walk, but longer on the way back because we had to go uphill. One day, Sarah and I decided to let Sammy and Alex come to the trampoline with us. They weren't really allowed very far from our houses without an adult or us with them. We played on it for about an hour or two and decided we were thirsty or hungry, one of the two, and decided to head back to Sarah and Alex's house for snacks. We were almost back to their house, but the last stretch before their house was the longest amount of isolated road with a creek flowing by and no houses lining the road, just dense forest. As soon as we cleared this area, we would be right on top of their house. As we're almost through the wooded part and we can see their house up ahead, a woman with short black hair and sunglasses is walking her baby in a stroller. She was walking towards us and would pass us soon. I didn't recognize her as somebody who lived in our neighborhood, and I know everyone, but lots of people from surrounding neighborhoods take walks here because of the woods. She passed by us normally, but right after she does, she says, "Oh, hey kids, I'm a little lost. What road is this?" None of us were very alarmed. The neighborhood is windy and can be confusing, and plus, she was a lady with a baby, not some creepy man. We told her the name of the road, and she told us she was really lost and needed to get home to take care of her baby. She then asked if we could escort her to her house because she didn't think she'd be able to find it even with directions. Sarah agreed to help, but I felt really uncomfortable and was told to never talk to strangers, even if they're women. I told the lady none of us could help because Sarah's dad was expecting us home soon. Sarah gave me a weird look, but I think she caught on because she said, "Oh yeah, we can't actually help. Sorry." At this point, I wasn't really freaked. I just knew I shouldn't be helping strangers to their house. I went to step in front of the younger two. They were trailing behind us, and I wanted to push them forward so we could start walking away. I stepped closer to the lady in my efforts and could then look in her stroller. That's when my heart sank. The baby was fake. It was a baby doll. It was all wrapped up in blankets, but I could see that it was plastic. At that point, I didn't know what to do, and I found myself screaming, "Run!" I made sure Sammy and Alex were ahead of me, and we sprinted for their house. Her dad was working in the garage on something, and we ran out of breath and crying. I quickly just said there was a lady trying to get us to go home with her who had a fake baby. He grabbed a golf club from his caddy that was lying out and told us to get in the house. We all went in, and a few minutes later he came back. He said he was heading towards the lady when she spotted him. She was already on the phone with somebody. Out of nowhere, a white van apparently screeched up, and she threw the stroller in and they sped off. It was definitely a creepy experience, and I don't know what that lady's intentions were, but I feel like they weren't innocent. This truly scared the shit out of us. We didn't wander around the neighborhood nearly as much, and when we did, we were always looking out for something. I am omitting identifying details for privacy's sake. If your world absolutely cannot go on without them, feel free to DM me. You've got a 50-50 shot of me answering or telling you to F off. Take it back to 2007/2008. I was 16 when this began and 18/19 when it finally went to court. Picture a Norman Rockwell-esque suburban family. Parents, 3 kids, a yard, and a dog in Blink and You'll Miss It USA. One random day, a neighbor man has a mild dispute with his neighbor. As a totally warranted response, neighbor man, who I'll call NM here on out, takes every hose he has and floods their yard. Solid decisions lead to solid consequences, so naturally he was fined for water waste. My parents run the water in small town USA, and because NM lived a block from us, he decided to drive over to the water district, shouting that he's an acquaintance of my parents. Second solid decision of many to come from NM. Absolutely no one takes kindly to name droppers, folks, so tuck that gem away under life facts. My parents come in and tells him even if his kids did this, they would have the same repercussions, gracefully glossing over the fact that other than maybe driving by one another, none of us actually have interacted with NM. NM repeats the name of the man working the front desk as well as my parents' name and claims, "It's now personal," and storms out. My family members and I began to see NM at random places constantly. The DMV, the grocery store, our respective jobs, etc. Apparently, when you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and your parents pay for your house, you have all kinds of time to stalk. It went from random sightings while out and about to phone calls. The cliche 90s type of call/breath/hang-ups and I can see you variety. At this point, NM was more of an annoyance than scary. But as I have stated, when you underestimate crazy, you lose every time. NM began parking across from our house, staying from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., literally just sitting in his car, blasting music, staring at the house. This fool must have had the determination and bladder of a racehorse because, what the heck, who sits there for 10-ish hours? His music was trash too. I doubt anybody with a semi-rational concept of social interaction could fathom why. This went on from 3 to 4 times a week to a nightly occurrence. Imagine being a 16-year-old female that doesn't even feel comfortable changing in her room because of the prospect he might see through the blinds somehow. Trying to sleep knowing he's out there. We felt like prisoners in our own home. He began to get bolder. NM drove his car speeding and up onto the sidewalk at my sibling and her partner. While they were on the sidewalk out front, coming home from a date, they both had to physically jump out of the way to avoid being hit. He made lewd gestures at me when I brought my dog out for a walk and was waiting for my sibling to come out and join us on the walk. It was so bad I ended up crying and going inside. This had been going on for a year at this point. The cops always said the same thing. There's nothing we can do unless there is a threat made against you or someone is harmed. My parents confronted, meaning tired of his shit and asking him what he thinks he's doing. NM in the street after my incident, to which NM called the cops and they came asking us why we were harassing and threatening NM. I will never understand why the system waits until you are a victim rather than preventing someone from being victimized. Almost 2 years in and it's Christmas time. One of my parents has a brain aneurysm. Fortunately, they made it through without any lingering effects, which is extremely rare. I convinced my other parent, who had been living at the hospital with their sick partner, to come home and shower and eat. At about 9 p.m., we get a knock at the door. A random man in ratty clothes holding a Christmas present says he is there to deliver it to the family name. We ask who sent him, and he says he can't say. We ask who he works for, and he shoves the gift to my parent and leaves. We are obviously uncomfortable opening it. My parent decides they need to know what it is and opens the present. Inside is a 17-page document on the grounds on why NM is suing my parent, who is currently in the hospital. Even I could tell it was fake, with grammatical errors and typos. NM took the time to sit and type this up himself, thinking it would scare us. The document and fake details he put in it did not. The fact that this 40-something-year-old man was so fixated on our family that he sat and typed a 17-page fake document did scare us. Things progressed, and NM began pacing in front of his car and pretending to have phone calls where he talked about pushing my parent down the stairs or knowing where we went to school and worked and how easy it would be to access us at any time. At the time, I worked a closing shift that let me off at about 1 a.m. He would be parked next to my car and followed me home. One time I even tried to take random roads and he still stayed right behind me. Pulling up to the house with NM parked across the street. Think neighborhood street with maybe 5 feet between a car parked on one side and one on the other, and having to get out and run to the door was a nightmare. We were all exhausted from not only the aneurysm scare, but also looking over our shoulders. My parents' friend told her friend, who is a DA, district attorney, about the situation. She called and came over and took our case on pro bono. Testifying was a wild ride. We had to put in official statements prior to being called to the stand. We were not allowed to be in the room when a family member was testifying, nor were we allowed to talk in the halls as we waited for our turn. Imagine reliving 2+ years of traumatic experiences, being cross-examined where you are made out to be a liar, and then not being able to have your family convert or support you afterwards. It was not ideal. There was enough time to put him away for a year and a half, as well as grant a felony restraining order. We moved while he was still incarcerated. My sister passed while he was in prison, and he immediately tried to sue her estate. She was 21 at her death when he was released. He claimed that her testimony about him running his car at her and her partner was false, and the only reason he was locked up. Not the case, as there were harassment and stalking charges, and that he was entitled to the money people donated to a GoFundMe for her accident. There are so many more details, but this was already long enough, so. NM, you made us prisoners in our home for years. Clearly are still the same and have not learned a thing from your time locked up. So these incidents started about 6 years ago and went on for a couple of years. I used to be really into the music scene, going to shows and festivals every chance I got. This often meant meeting random people whose names I would forget 5 seconds later. As a result of being out in Atlanta nightlife so often, I got frequent friend requests on Facebook, and naive younger me blindly accepted them, assuming they were just people I'd met at shows that I was too drunk or distracted to remember. One day, I got a message from somebody named Eddie. His Facebook profile picture was of someone at least a decade older than me, with long straggly hair. He looked harmless enough, just another show-going hippie, I assumed. His message simply asked if I was the girl that danced a half circle around him at the local show last night, and then twirled dreamily away, or something along those lines. This was back in 2012, so I don't remember the exact words. I responded that I had no recollection of that, and upon further investigation, saw that he lived in an entirely different state, so it couldn't have been me. He said that I must have a doppelganger out there somewhere, and I left the conversation at that. Over the next few months, I'd get random notifications that he had messaged me, asking if I'd be at various shows across the southeast. I mostly ignored the messages, but would very occasionally respond, shortly expressing interest in a band he had mentioned, just trying to be polite. Why younger me felt the need to be polite to everyone is beyond me. I have since learned that it's okay to not respond to persistent internet strangers. The messages became more and more frequent, so I just started to leave them unread. Again, why I didn't block him is beyond me. I guess I thought he was just harmless and lonely. Fast forward about a year. It's the summer of 2013 if 2 of my best friends and I were caravanning to Wakarusa, a music festival that took place in Ozark, Arkansas. It was about a 13-hour drive from Atlanta, but totally worth it. We went every year. An important note here is that this wasn't some small intimate festival. It hosted upwards of 40,000 people, and it was often hard to keep track of my friends, let alone find people I knew who came separately. So my friends and I are on a blanket in the middle of a huge crowd, watching widespread panic. It's nighttime, so the only lights are coming from the stage / random LED toys or glow sticks or whatever. Out of nowhere, someone beelines for our blanket, makes himself at home next to me without permission, and strikes up a conversation. My group of friends is generally warm and accepting, and it wasn't unusual to make random friends at a big hippie fest like this, so I thought nothing of it at first. Probably just someone high on ecstasy and looking for company. It wasn't until he started referencing me in my Facebook personally that the alarm bells started going off. This was Eddie. I had honestly completely forgotten about him and his persistent messages, and in the darkness, there was no way I would have recognized him. He was talking like I was an old friend and tried to follow us around all night. Once I subtly alerted the others about who he was, we made every excuse in the book to try and leave, go back to our campsite and call it a night. He was painfully insistent on following us back there and continuing to hang out. Obviously, I didn't want him to know where I slept, so I tried to appease him by saying I was exhausted, but that we could try to meet up tomorrow. Again, dumb, I know. I was just doing anything I could to get him away in the moment and had no intention of actually following through. He finally left us alone, and we walked a long roundabout way to our campsite, just in case he had watched her or tried to follow at a distance. The next day, I made an avid point to avoid the area where we ran into Eddie / discussed meeting up. The festival venue was huge, so I figured there was no way he'd find me again. I was beside a small stage in the back corner of the venue, hooping in the woods with my friends, when I noticed him out of the corner of my eye. He was standing beside a tree alone, watching me with a weird smile. It reminded me of a proud dad watching his young daughter play, but with way creepier and more sinister overtones. Still, he hadn't done or said anything explicitly creepy or threatening, but his presence was so unsettling that I grabbed my friends and we pretended that we had forgotten about a set that was starting, so we ran out of the wooded stage area. I remember hoping he didn't notice I had seen him. The festival ended the next day, and I was relieved to not see him again. Fast forward about another year. At this point, I barely used Facebook and had all but forgotten about Eddie. My friend that I went to the festival with was visiting from out of town that night, and we were going to get some drinks. He got to my house, and we were catching up, and the subject of the festival came up. We started talking about Eddie and how weird that whole situation was, but at this point, it was less creepy and more of just a strange memory. I told him Eddie used to message me all the time, but I had stopped opening them years ago. Naturally, my friend wanted to look through the messages, so I obliged. I began to scroll through the messages, and I realized just how dire of a mistake it may have been not to block him. He had started by asking me what shows I was going to go to, what part of Atlanta I lived in, etc. Not taking the hint that I clearly had no interest in responding at that point. Then, as the months went by, he was sending me links to tickets he had bought for me to shows in Atlanta, and then links to tickets he had bought for us to go together. There was one message asking where he could pick me up for a show that was 2 hours away in Athens, and saying that he couldn't wait to see me again. The messages continued to go on, but at this point, I was so creeped out, I immediately blocked him, finally, and closed the computer wide-eyed. What the actual heck? He sounded like he was carrying on an entire relationship with me without my consent. He never acknowledged the fact that I literally hadn't responded to or even seen a message from him in over a year. Shaken up, we decided to just go get a drink and stop thinking about this weirdo. We get to Edgewood, a popular bar district in my city, and walk to our favorite small bar to get a drink. As soon as we walk into the bar, my heart sinks to the pit of my stomach. To this day, this was the creepiest / most coincidental moment that has ever happened. I see Eddie sitting at the far end of the bar. His face lights up as soon as I walk in, and he motions me over. He says something along the lines of, "I can't believe it's you," and starts firing off questions about me, my life, what I've been up to, and all that. At this point, the darkest feeling washes over me. I just feel unsafe and exposed. Like, why is he here? He doesn't even live in Georgia. I quickly tell him I have to use the bathroom, but then I'll be back to the bar for a drink. I grab my friend, equally in shock, and we speed walk around the corner to the bathrooms and then past them. I'll forever be grateful that the door to the patio area was just past the bathroom, so got a head start. We get outside, hop the fence, and start running to my car. I glance behind us, and Eddie somehow figured out in those 15 seconds that we left, even though you can't see the bathrooms from where he was sitting, and he is walking rapidly across the sidewalk in our direction, eyes on me. We book it to my car and get the heck out of there, and leave Edgewood as quickly as we can. Shaken, I drive us around for about an hour before eventually going home to make sure we weren't being followed. As inconclusive as the whole thing was, that was the last time I ever saw Eddie, and I often wonder if this was just a strange string of coincidences, or it was more sinister. After all, he didn't even live in Georgia. Why was he at one of my favorite bars alone, the night I happened to go through all of his old messages? Had he somehow gotten a hold of my location via Facebook? I made sure all my location services were off when I checked my phone, so to this day I have no idea how he ended up there or what his intentions were. Some background. I, 28 female, am a dog walker / pet sitter. Some of the dogs I walk have reactivity, as did this one dog, a pit / lab mix. She used to be a bad puller, along with being incredibly reactive to other dogs on leash as soon as she'd see them. Through lots of work and training with her, she has come a long way with her reactivity, to the point it's really not an issue anymore, even when other owners' carelessness allows their dogs to get too close for comfort. On this one walk, she was a dream the whole time. Past multiple dogs without issue, she would just look at me for her treat that she knew she'd get if she was good. We turned down a side street that looked completely vacant at the time, so I could give her some more relaxed walking time, and all went well for a while. Not a soul in sight until there was. While I'm usually very good at keeping my head on a swivel, as some of my walks are not in the safest areas of the city, this guy took me by surprise. I don't know how he did it, but he got about 2 to 3 feet behind us without my dog or me knowing he was there, and all of a sudden shouted something unintelligible. I could only make out the last 2 words. "Your dog." Immediately, my dog, with no prior history of human reactivity, got between us and started growling, snapping and lunging aggressively at this man. I'm a smaller woman at 5'3", and I'd say this guy was around 6'7", at the very least, and incredibly muscular. As soon as he saw my dog trying to attack him and me struggling to hold her back, he threw his arms up and bolted across the street without another word. Disappeared shortly after around the corner. I've never praised a dog for her reactivity until that moment. I gave her all the treats I had left in my pocket, took her home and told her owner what had just happened and how her dog might have saved my life. Of course I hope I'm wrong and the guy was just slow with social cues, but neither the dog nor I got that impression. Needless to say, she's been my favorite client dog. I go on walks with her still every week, but we haven't gone down that street again while there are no people about. When I was 17 female, my older sister, 23, took me to the mall to get a cell phone. The guy who sold it to us probably was in his early 20s. showed us several options, and let me pick the phone. Choose from a selection of numbers, pretty standard, and set us up with a plan, and we left. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary when I got a text. "Hey, it's the guy who sold you your new phone." I replied, "I'm not sure what. I was young and naive. This was 13 years ago." What I do remember is that he kept texting me and calling me. Kept calling about how attractive I was and that we should be together. I told him it wasn't a good time for me. I was about to leave for the entire summer. He asked where I was going and offered to come along. I didn't have any hard plans. Was going to live out of my car and definitely didn't want a stranger to ride along. I thought it was odd that he would just quit his job and leave the state on a whim for a girl he only spoke to in person for around 15 minutes. I told him I thought that was creepy, and I asked him to leave me alone and stop calling and texting. He kept calling. I kept not answering. He had to file a complaint and change my number. Yeah, this was short, but I wonder how many people experience something like this, just trying to get a cell phone, but it came with a stalker. So to start, I'm a transgender woman. I'm single and I make my status as trans very clear on all my dating profiles. Except Plenty of Fish, because they consider that to be talking about sex and they will straight up ban you. So I state instead that I'm a huge proponent of trans rights. So this guy messages me. He lives about an hour away. Kinda cute in a mildly creepy way, like something seems a little off about him, but people can't help how they look, so I give him a chance, just like I would want. I discover he's a smoker, but he says he's trying hard to quit and only does it when he's really stressed out or upset. We have a nice conversation, and finally he asks for my number. And without thinking about it, I give him the number but tell him I'm getting ready for my evening classes, so I'll be slow to respond. A few minutes go by and I get, "Hi, it's blank from POF." Now, usually I send a standard quick message. "Hi, it's Allie," so just to be clear, since my profile might be a little vague, I'm a transgender woman. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, so if you're not interested, I completely understand. About 20% of the time, the guy isn't interested and gets rude and needs to be blocked. And the other 80% is split between immediate inappropriate questions and dick pics, casual acceptance, or dead silence. But like I said, I was getting ready to go to class, so I hadn't sent the message yet. A few minutes go by, and I'm about to text him my standard when I get another text. Who the heck is... insert full dead name here. And why is he paying your cell phone bill? Me. Where did you even get that name? Answer the question. Who is he? He said. I'm honestly stunned at this point, and I realize he must have paid one of those shady websites that offer personal info for a fee. Well, if you must know, I'm transgender and that used to be my name. I was about to tell you when you pulled that stunt. Please do us a favor and lose my number. That's incredibly invasive and I don't want to talk to you anymore. Do you still live at... insert my address? In blank hometown? I'm coming to see you so we can talk about this in person. Me, lying. No, I moved a few months ago and I'm getting ready to head out, like I said. You need to leave me alone. Don't contact me again. Him. Since you have nothing to hide, I'm going to run a full background check on you. You lied to me and I don't appreciate that. Me. I'm sending screen caps of this conversation, your POF profile and your photos to my two best friends who work in law enforcement in your town and my ex-boyfriend who I'm still on good terms with, who also works for the local sheriff's office. Don't text me again. I didn't hear anything else from him for a few weeks. I made sure my doors and windows were locked and the aforementioned friends and ex would check up on me from time to time. Eventually, it just came one of those weird things, makes you laugh uneasily. And then one day, I thought I saw him at the local grocery store. Same dark hair, thick glasses frames, and just an overall creepy guy, staring at me, watching me as I shopped. I texted my ex about it, and as an upswing on things, my ex and I got back together in a casual sort of way, and he stayed the night a few times a month off and on. One night when I was alone, though, I just kept getting this weird feeling and smelling smoke. I lived in a little apartment complex that was 3 separate apartments that shared walls but no plumbing or air ducts. I don't smoke and I'm very sensitive to the smell thanks to asthma. The apartment had a wall unit AC, so I turned it off since it was apparently pulling air in from a neighbor's guest, who must have been chain smoking, I thought. I had an ASL video due the next morning, so I was up all night practicing and recording the video, signing the same story over and over again until it was almost a dance rather than narration. A couple of times I had to restart the video because my cat was going nuts. Finally, around 7 a.m., I had the video finished and sent in and was ready for bed, so I double-checked all the doors and windows were locked, set an alarm and went to sleep. I woke up and got ready for school. I was running a bit late and had to hurry out the door, but I noticed something weird, but I didn't have time to stop and register it. Classes went smoothly. I got an A on my ASL video, and I stopped for groceries on my way home from class. As I got home, I saw what had been bugging me. Each apartment had a small garden on each side of the porch. Mine was nothing but gravel and pavers previous tenant had put in, but it was tidy, except for a pile of cigarette butts that looked like somebody had dumped their car ashtray in my garden. There was no other trash, just that pile, right in front of my bedroom window. I don't think anything about it at first and just get a broom and dustpan and sweep it up. As I'm doing it, my neighbor, an old man, comes out and asks if my boyfriend ever got a hold of me. I ask him what he means. He tells me there was a young man waiting for me on my front porch, off and on for a few hours last night, and that he'd seen the guy around before and thought he was my boyfriend. I asked what he looked like. Dark hair, thick glasses, chain smoking. I text it on and off again next. Cops take statements and I give them the screenshots. I moved out of state a few weeks later for unrelated reasons and have legally changed my name since, with closed records. I don't give guys my number anymore. Ladies and my fellow queer family, use a texting app until you get to know someone, because for like $5, creeps can get everything from your number. This happened literally a month ago, back in February, when my boyfriend and I had decided to try out an open relationship for a little while, for various reasons. We live separately in one of the larger cities in the north of Middle America, and there is a decently sized population of college students, like me, to keep the gay community fresh, so I was doing pretty well for myself. One night I was bored and scrolling through Grindr, looking for an easy hookup when I got a message from a guy who was barely 800 feet away. He wasn't terrible looking, and I was a little desperate, so I agreed to go to his place. He lives quite literally down the street from me. I can see his building from my window. I walked over and he let me up and into his apartment. We made small talk and I mentioned where I lived. Heck, I even pointed out my window from one of the windows in the stairwell. From the first, I thought there was something off about the guy. Not necessarily bad, just different. An odd twitch in his hands when he gripped the banister. The vacancy of his eyes when he smiled. I'm not so cliche as to say he felt evil or anything like that, but I wasn't exactly surprised that, after we got to his apartment, the first thing he did was to tell his very pretty and friendly cat to say hello, and the second thing he did was walk over to the kitchen counter, grab a needle and shoot up. I hadn't even closed the door behind me. I stood there staring, and he turned around, dropped the needle on the counter and went, "Oh shit, I should have asked. Are you cool with that?" I am not a good Christian boy. I have broken into a church while tripping on LSD, had sex on a headstone back in high school, but I have my standards. So I shook my head mutely, pulled my hat back on, and opened the door to leave. The guy rushed over and put a hand over my shoulder. "Yo, I'm sorry. You don't have to go. You don't even have to mess around. You want to watch Transformers 3 with me or something?" "Nope," I said bluntly, hustling away down the stairs. I bundled up my scarf against the early February chill and hurried back down the street to my apartment. He followed me downstairs, barefoot in pajama pants and a t-shirt, until I stepped outside into the whipping winds. I turned back briefly to look after a moment, and he was still staying there in the doorway, watching me. I didn't have any premonitions of doom or weirdness. I grew up in Missouri. Junkies barely register as odd to me by this point, so I went home and went to bed. Now, you might have guessed it, but I'd never seen this dude around the neighborhood before. Truthfully, I hadn't seen most of my neighbors because my neighborhood is an odd mixture of white-collar suburbia, college housing, and low-income housing like my Paramour's building, all in one street. So it didn't really register when I started seeing him more. I would leave for work in the afternoon, and he'd be on the other avenue across from my building, strolling along, or he'd cut across my building's parking lot like all the kids in the neighborhood did. A couple times I saw him walking across the campus mall. My apartment building is directly adjacent to my campus, but he'd always swerve to avoid me. Once or twice I noticed him in the grocery store I work at as a barista, but it's the only one within walking distance, and he mentioned he didn't have a car. This went on for the entire month of February. Eventually, I started noticing he'd always be walking down the street opposite my building when I left for work at my usual time, and he was only ever at the store when I was working. He never approached the coffee stand within the store, where I worked, but he'd look at me. A couple times I noticed him enter, look at me, pretend to shop, and leave without buying anything. I was starting to feel creeped out, but he hadn't done anything yet to make me feel particularly unsafe. One day late in February, I worked an early shift. When I got off, I felt a little crazy from lack of sleep, and I reached my place about 20 minutes before I usually leave for work. And on the corner of the sidewalk opposite me was the guy. He was checking his watch over and over and looking up. I did a bit of brilliant deductive analysis and followed his gaze up to my living room window. And I looked back down at him. He looked right at me. There was a moment of tension as we stared each other in the eyes. Like I said, this dude didn't give off any evil or dark vibes. I've met people that do. No, what I saw in this guy's eyes and his face was more than human and much scarier. Desperation, loneliness, pain, and anger. He hurried after me, but I'm 6'3" and a former sprinter, whereas he was a 5'8" junkie wearing flip-flops on ice. I made it to the first set of doors to my apartment, scanned myself in through the second, and locked them behind me. He walked through the unlocked first set, tried to open the second, tried pushing the handicap button to open them, and then gave up. "Look, man, I'm sorry," he shouted, laying a hand on the glass of the door. "Can we talk about it?" I shook my head. "Absolutely not. Leave me alone." Then I rolled on my heel and stomped over to the elevator. When I turned back, he had gone out into the snow. I didn't see him for a couple of weeks afterward, which was nice, because my boyfriend likes to walk down the street past the dude's apartment when he stays over and needs to go smoke. One night, my boyfriend was over at my place. He'd just gone out to smoke before he went to bed. And he mentioned that he wanted me to come with him the next time he went out. "Why?" I asked, pulling him in close to me while he shivered. "It's dark and cold and I get paranoid out there sometimes." He mumbled it into my chest. "There's this creepy dude that sometimes stands on the corner across the way and just stares at the building. One time he asked me for a cigarette and I told him I didn't have one when I had one literally in my hand." He laughed, kissed my chin, and passed out. I lay there awake, troubled. When I was sure my boyfriend was deeply asleep, meaning after about 5 minutes had passed, I extricated myself and went to the window. It was a cold, clear night. I could see across the street, under the orange glow of the streetlight, the guy. I couldn't make him out clearly, but when he saw me, he waved. I flicked him off and closed the blinds. I didn't feel like I should tell my boyfriend because he was either going to immediately go to the police, which I hate doing, or he'd try and defend me. And while I love him with my entire heart, I don't want to watch a fight between a junkie stalker and my underweight nicotine-addicted boyfriend. I kept it to myself and still haven't told him. But I did start accompanying him when he went out to smoke. The guy was usually outside. Sometimes he'd follow us for a bit before ducking away down a side street. Sometimes he'd watch from a distance, and sometimes he'd be up in his apartment. My boyfriend never noticed. I kept my composure and nothing happened. One night, though, we went out so my boyfriend could smoke, like normal. When we reached the end of the street and turned around, the stalker was behind us, about 50 feet back. I turned my head to check, and there he was. He waved at me again, and something told me I had to get back inside. "Hey, babe," I said quietly to my boyfriend. "Let's get back inside, yeah? I'm cold." He agreed and said okay, saying I'm almost done anyway. We walked back to the apartment building, and without turning, I knew that the stalker was behind us the entire time. I kept my hand intertwined with my boyfriend's and kept up the casual conversation we've been having about how I hate geese. Got back up to my apartment, and he got changed for bed while I grabbed some water. I've never lived in an apartment before, and I don't know if it's odd or not, but this building has a wired telephone in each unit that rings when somebody wants to be let in. Ours never rings unless it's Uber Eats, so my boyfriend was surprised when it started ringing late at night when neither of us had ordered anything. "Probably just some asshole playing a prank," I said, unhooking the phone from the wall and putting it in the kitchen cabinet. He accepted that without a struggle, and we lay down in bed. After he was soundly out, I got up, got dressed, grabbed a couple of things, and headed downstairs in my thick winter coat. Sure enough, my fanboy was out there in the parking lot. He waved at me and jogged over, smiling broadly. "Hey, man." "What do you want?" I said flatly. "Look, man, I feel like we ended things awkwardly last time and I just wanted to talk to you," he said. "So you stalked me?" "What?" He started to look angrier, his brows furrowing. "Nah, man, I didn't stalk you. I just wanted to know when I could talk to you, but you always avoid me. Now you're walking around out here with that skinny little bitch boy trying to rub it in my face, and I don't appreciate that." "Look, man," he said, smiling again, stepping closer. "Do you want to go talk about this back at my place? Ditch him and come hang out with me tonight. Please, I won't shoot up or anything this time." He took another step closer to me. I saw in his right hand a dully gleaming piece of metal, folded up switchblade. He smiled at me and I stepped back, shaking my head. His smile drained away into a deep scowl. "Bitch, I'm done asking. You're gonna come over to my place and finish what we started," he growled, unfolding the knife and pointing it at me. Like I said, this dude was 5'8" tops and skinny. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds, and regularly lift weights. Also, I had a 12-inch kitchen knife, which I drew from my coat pocket and leveled at his throat. He looked at my knife, and then back at his and smiled again. Bro, I was just playing. We don't have to. We can just talk right here, man. I cut him off, and I said, leave me and my boyfriend alone, very quietly, or I will cut your face off and eat it. What the heck? He said. I spent 8 years in juvie for stabbing a kid in middle school. I lied. He backed up, putting the knife back in his pocket. I took a step closer, holding my knife level. He backed away quickly, almost falling on the ice, until he was sprinting back to his place. And I was chasing him down with my knife until he crossed the street and I stopped, slid the knife in my pocket, and watched him run back to his building. Then I went back up to my bedroom, told my boyfriend I just had to go pee, and fell asleep.